So my name is Sharon Atinu. I'm a press officer at Africa Science Media Center. Today's briefing is on Marburg, a deadly virus that belongs to the family of Ebola, according to the knowledge that we've had so far. And with us today is Dr. Michael Owusu from Ghana to explain more on this disease and what Ghana is doing to contain the spread of the virus. So Dr. Owusu is a clinical microbiologist and a lecturer at the Department of Medical Diagnostics, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. He also holds a research fellow position at the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research in Tropical Medicine, KCCR. Dr. Owusu has extensive experience in investigating livestock and wildlife samples for agents including animal coronaviruses, viral hemorrhagic viruses, and other zoonotic agents. He's a fellow of the European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership, EDCTP, and the African Research Excellence Fund. So the floor is yours, Dr. Owusu. Feel welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then good morning to all of you. And thanks for the opportunity to engage you on this particular disease that seems to be a problem on the African continent, and for which Ghana is also becoming one of the countries that has recorded outbreak and currently trying to work out to see how best this can be contained. So what do we know about these viruses? You mentioned already that these are viruses which are in a family that we call the Filoviridae family, which is a sister to the Ebola viruses. So, I happen to have done quite a number of research in animal viruses, which have a potential of transmitting to human beings. So even before the outbreak occurred in Ghana, we have suspicion that there will be a time that we could have a spillover of some of these potential organisms, except that we were not too sure how this will happen. So, animals, rodents, including mice, bats, and many bushmeat animals are common in Ghana and in many parts of Africa, especially within the West African sub-region. So somewhere years back, around 2011, 2010, we have done a series of studies where we collected samples from bats, including bats' blood samples, and have been able to identify some agents of potential, agents that are likely to cause potential disease and pandemics, except that these were hidden in them. So in Ghana, for instance, between October to December 2011, there was a report that our colleagues in the Gucci worked on in a region that we call the Manso Nkwanta in the Amansia West District. We recorded 2 cases of Lassa fever. Lassa fever is transmitted by mice and likely also to be a possible zoonotic transmission that occurred in human beings, where we have 2 people who lost their lives. And these people were farmers, actually. So, and the second case of the second outbreak, which is what we are talking about, which is the Marburg, is occurring in a place called the Dancing North and then Obuasi. So these are 2 districts which are all linked along the same pipeline as we have seen for the Manso Nkwanta. So some of us have the notion that along the chain of transmission, you have some mammals which are likely to be reservoirs of organisms, including Marburg and then Lassa fever and many other viruses that are only waiting for an opportune time to cause a disease and also to cause outbreaks. So So it's something that I think we're only sitting on the time bomb and only have this case occur. If you have reviewed literature, you also observe that in the Emerging Microbes and Infectious Journal, says published somewhere around 2010, one of some researchers have done a study in Ghana where that was about 1997, where they found antibodies to Marburg viruses in 3 out of 48 HIV patients. So they didn't detect the actual virus, but then people have antibodies to them, which means that people have had past exposure to Marburg, but we didn't know then. We didn't have the system for tracking and detection. So I'm sure maybe something have occurred since the 97, but then we could not follow through this because as at that time, maybe our surveillance systems were not much stronger. In 2010, there were about 262 bats that were screened. We call them the Eidolon bats. And in these bats, I mean, there were some antibodies detected for Ebola and Marburg-like viruses, which were in this. I mean, some of the colonies habit about 1 million bats in certain places in Ghana that could also have these organisms. Okay. So what are we dealing with now? So currently we are dealing with, I mean, one of the strongest viruses, which has a potential of causing much outbreak. It have a case fatality of about 24 to up to about 84%. This virus is transmitted by a bat. We normally call them the fruit bats. So the name of the fruit bat is called the Rosette Egypticus. There are 2 common fruit bats that are known to transmit disease. The one that transmits Ebola is called the Eidolon helvum bat. And the one that transmits Marburg is called the Rosette Egypticus bat. So these are bats that, you know, bats are mammals, and bats are the only mammals that can fly. So what it means is that they have the viruses as part of their natural body reservoir. But then as they interact with other animals, they are able to transmit to those animals. So maybe rodents, including mice, grass cutter, squirrels, can be infected by these viruses from the primary host, which are the bats. And then when human beings go out to hunt for these rodents, even including the bat themselves, human beings can get the infection from these bats and also from these rodents. So in the bats, they don't have a disease, they don't have any infection. But then if they transmit to other mammals, including human beings, those mammals tend to have a disease and infection. So if the case in Ghana, for instance, it was clear that these people were farmers who had gone out to do their own farming activities, and some way, somehow, they got exposed, and they became infected, and they died instantly from this. The previous case of Lassa fever also occurred among farmers. So these were farmers that were going out to do their own activity, and it appears that they might have interacted with some wild bush animals for which they became exposed to this. So the transmission pattern is quite clear, and we know that this is one of the things that often occur. So how does transmission occur in human beings? So the first line is from the reservoir to the mammals, and then from the mammals to the human beings. And then the next line is from human to human. So the human to human phase is what we are dealing with. I mean, the first line of infection, you can trace it to animal origin. But then when it gets to the human beings, it means that it's no more animals that are given to the human beings, but then humans are transmitting to their fellow human beings. And how does this occur? This occurs mostly through a contact with broken skin or mucous membrane. So if people have blood secretions, sweat, saliva, and they have to interact either through exchange of body fluids, a cut on your skin, or maybe you can get sweat from somebody and put it in your mouth, or in your eyes, wherever you have fluids go through, you have a chance of becoming infected. Even if you exchange clothes that are contaminated with fluids, and you wipe your face and all that, you are likely to have to be infected by this virus. So human-to-human transmission occurs a lot through body-to-body contacts. We also understand that one of the main routes of transmission in Africa is through burial ceremony. So in Ghana, the first case that occurs in Adansi North occurred just at the spot that's within the Ashanti region. But the second case, we understand that the body was moved to another region, we call the Savannah region. And then those who were involved in handling and processing the body, two of them later manifested the symptoms. So currently we have 3 cases on our hand who have, become susceptible to this as a result of handling people that have died of this. So handling dead bodies is one of the common routes of transmission in Africa, because unlike COVID, if you die of Marburg or Ebola, the body becomes more and more infectious. So as you handle the body, as you process the body, including taking care of the dead and all that, these are one of the likely places that you could easily get infected. The third place is healthcare workers. So because in Ebola, you need a high level of personal protective equipment to be able to deal with this virus. If you remember, in Liberia, in Guinea, Sierra Leone, it wasn't easy dealing with this within the healthcare setting, because you need to have highly protective PPEs where they have to handle the patients. They have to come out, have a sodium hypochlorite sprayed on their body, put on Wellington boots, put on goggles. So you need to be more firm and more protected before you can handle fluids, bodies, exposures from patients like this. So COVID, yes, can transmit, but then because this is highly fatal, if you have to be exposed, you are likely to suffer for it. So you cannot, it's not something that you can easily joke with. And the healthcare setting must be adequately disinfected at any point in time, and to ensure that there are no contaminations around. So that is, the healthcare setting is another route that people can easily get infected. We know that if you get a virus, you could have, the incubation period is from 2 to 21 days. It means that if I get it today, some can experience the symptoms after 2 days, some after 4 days, some after 5 days. But on the average, between 5 to 10 days, people are likely to have the signs and symptoms. It starts with fever, high fever, severe headache, body aches, body weakness. And the first symptom that appears something like malaria. So if you have malaria or typhoid, the symptoms that you manifest are likely to be something that is mild. You may not see it initially. But then from day 3 to day 7, patients are likely to have watery diarrhea, abdominal pains, they may have vomiting, appearance of patients they may begin to have the wild shock of the disease. From day 8 to day 9, people are likely to die or may recover. But then the recovery period is quite not certain, it's quite low. About 10 to 20% of people are likely to recover, but many people may enter into shock or may likely die. We also know that even for males who recover, the virus can cause infection or inflammation of the testes. So people may have problems with testicular infections, and they may even transmit the virus through sexual intercourse even after they recover. So after recovery, just like we knew for Ebola, you still can transmit even if you get well as a man from this virus. So what are the strategies and then the mechanisms that we are used, and what we are doing currently in Ghana? So Ghana has one of the most robust surveillance systems, which we call the Integrated Disease Surveillance Response System. So from the health centers to the communities, to the districts, the regions, and then to the national, we have reportable diseases that are always managed and reported to the healthcare system. So Marburg, Ebola, COVID, yellow fever, and about 15 diseases. Once you see it as a doctor or as a nurse, you have to report it. And when you report it, it's quickly transmitted to the public health division of the Ghana Health Service, and then an alert is raised that you have identified something of that nature. If in case you are not able to diagnose at your facility, the samples are collected and sent to our labs in the region in Accra. So in the case of Marburg, for instance, the doctors who first identified the cases knew that they had to collect samples because the signs and symptoms appeared like some of the viral hemorrhagic fever disease viruses. So the samples were collected, the samples were sent to the Noguchi Memorial Institute of Medical Research, and it was tested, and the results were sent back. And quickly, an alert was raised. And then the contacts of the patient, which are the health workers, were placed under quarantine, and then were observed and for 21 days to see if they will manifest the symptoms. And then the bodies were handled in line with the protocols for handling dead bodies, which are known to be highly infectious. So this system operates in Ghana, and that is how we have been doing for years now. So as I speak now, the contacts of all those that have died are under observation. The first case, about 93 contacts were observed across the Ashanti region. These were discharged. There was no infection. The second case in the northern region, where the body was transmitted to, we understand that 2 of the cases manifested the symptoms through observation. And then the 2 have died. 1 of them has been confirmed to have the Marburg. The second one is still undergoing testing to see what actually resulted. But it's possible that it's possible the second one, who was a child of the daughter of a mother, also might have died of this. So the others, I know, are about 23 people. We will be informed about what happens next. So what are the measures for treatment as we speak? As you already know, there are no vaccines for this virus, and there are no drugs or antivirals for this virus. So our doctors rely on what we call the supportive care or supportive therapy. What it means is that if patients are losing body fluids, they are given IV fluids. For those that have pains, they are given anti-pain medications. For those that may have eye inflammations, they are also treated for eye infections. Those that are bleeding are also given transfusion of blood. So these are what doctors are using currently to manage patients, with the hope that the patients will be able to at least get well. But it's not easy. You have a chance of survival, but then there are also chances that if these are not managed well, the patient may lose his life. What are we supposed to do now? I mean, as a country or as people in Ghana when you have this? So one of the first things that is an educational strategy that the government and the public health is trying to pursue is to educate the populace, especially in the communities that are affected. I mean, people are being educated to, if possible, avoid things like bat meat, for instance, because bats are the natural reservoirs. So avoid eating or killing or hunting those meats. As much as possible, avoiding bush meats along the places where outbreaks have happened. These are things that are being announced. I'm also aware that people are being advised that if you see somebody has died of a disease for which there is an unknown cause, you leave the body with the healthcare authorities to handle it. You don't carry the body to your home and perform any funeral rites. So this is one thing that is also being pursued aggressively. So because the burial is one of the areas that people can easily become exposed to. In the healthcare setting also, there is an active campaign for what we call infection prevention control and protocol measures. So all the COVID protocols when it comes to application of sanitizers, wearing of PPEs, disinfection are things that are also being pursued aggressively to see how best this could be controlled and this could be managed. And then people are being advised to cook meat well and not to eat raw meat. But as much as possible, even if they have to eat meat, they must process it and cook it well in order to avoid infection. The wildlife division is heavily involved, and I'm aware that they are actively trying to engage the authorities at the local area to see how best they will be able to deal with some of this. So I think in brief, this is what so far we know, and then are trying to do about Ghana. In terms of diagnosis, Ghana has about 70 sites that can test, have PCR equipment that can test for viruses. And this is as a result of the capacity we have had from COVID. So currently Noguchi, which is one of the central labs in Accra, is testing. There's a lab also in the London part called KCCR where I work. We will also resume testing very soon. But then the other 60 to 70 labs around that are being trained. There are protocols being put in place to train them so that they will also be able to get themselves more prepared to test in case the outbreak spill over and gets out of control. So this is where we are now, and then I'll make myself available for questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that wonderful presentation. I see Esther Nakazi has already raised up her hand. Esther, you can ask the question.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you very much, Doctor. We are glad to have you here. My questions, so you've talked about the way the barriers have been sort of changed. I would like to understand how you are telling the local people really, how are they taking this change of culture? Because this we have seen in Ebola, but sometimes it comes with resistance. And secondly, Sharon, please allow me to ask another one.
Yeah.
Doctor, do you think that Marburg has pandemic potential regionally and locally? And have you been able to contain the outbreak? Can we say that you have now been able to contain the outbreak? Thank you so much. Over to you, Sharon.
Okay,
I think, Doctor,
so
you can answer the first two questions.
Thanks for this question. So you know that within the African culture, dealing with burial, educating people about burial is very difficult. And I know in the northern part of Ghana, for instance, they have had a case where the family have refused to allow the body to be carried or to be managed by the healthcare authorities. And mostly it's underpinned either by religion or by the place where the person comes from. So there is a campaign, for instance, in the Islamic community, when somebody dies, immediately the body must be buried. But then, I mean, for Marburg, for instance, you don't want people to handle the body immediately. You want the body to be handed over to the environmental health and sanitation officers who have special body bags, put them in, and then bury it at a place that is much safer for it. So there is an engagement with the community to try and cooperate with the health authorities when it comes to this. But like you mentioned, this is not easy. This is something that education is still being done to encourage the population to go by this. It's not just burial, but then there are cases where even contacts of people who have died, who have been told to stay at places that are dedicated where they are being observed, have decided to go to prayer camps to pray and to get themselves other places where they think they will seek help. And this is the same thing with Ebola, where people don't want to resort to any form of support from the healthcare system, but they want to rely on the prayer camps and other places where they believe if they are sick, they will be healed. So we are equally dealing with this. We only hope that we can manage this quickly, but in case this goes out of hand, this is one of the major problems that we are going to face. But we hope that with the COVID lessons we have learned, we will be able to at least engage this and then deal with it appropriately. On the potential for pandemic, well, I don't think that Marburg, Ebola, Lassa fever have potential for causing global pandemic like we have seen for COVID, because the route of transmission is more limited compared to COVID. These are body-to-body contact and also burial. And it's also highly unlikely that asymptomatic people can transmit. In COVID, for instance, 60% of the transmission is carried by people who don't show the symptoms. So it means they can move with it, they can travel with it, they can go to any other places and then have their own thing. But then when it comes to things like Marburg, Ebola, you are likely to be stationary. You are likely to stay at certain places. So the chances of moving this highly unlikely. What may happen is what we saw in the case of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Ghana is linked to Burkina, and then you can link it also to Ivory Coast, and this could be linked to Nigeria. So what may happen is that if in case you have bodies that are buried along the Ghana-Burkina border, and the bodies are carried across the border, you are likely to have a spillover to neighboring borders, like we saw in the case of Ebola. So movement of people is likely to be associated with this transmission, but then travel, like air travel, is unlikely. So global pandemic is not something that we should think about, but this is likely to be global and regional border transmission. This is what may likely happen in case this goes out of hand. You ask whether we have contained this. Not yet, because the next number of contact that has been seen, I think, has not gone through the 21 days of observation. This occurs in chains. The first contacts went through the 21 days, out of which we had some people in the northern region manifest the symptoms. So those contacts are being followed for another 21 days with the hope that we wouldn't see any case. But in case we see a case, another 21 days has to follow. So you follow this until you are able to close this and then deal with it once and for all. But as we speak now, the last contacts are still being observed. If we don't see anything, then it means that we are making a headway. But in case some also manifest the same thing, then of course we'll continue with this follow-up and contacts and observation until we are able to deal with it. We hope we'll be able to do with the experience we have in Ghana, but then we can't always promise, because of the local response, community response to this is very crucial. And we hope the community will still work with us to ensure that we are able to deal with it once and for all.
Sorry about the network hiccup. Joseph, you can go ahead and ask your question. Joseph, I don't know if you asked your question. You can go ahead and ask your question. So as Joseph works on his internet.
Hi.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So, Dr. Owusu, thank you very much. That's a very good overview of the Ghana situation. Thanks very much for all the information. But just a few questions. So, first of all, we know that when COVID unfolded, some specific advice was given to ordinary members of the public on what we can do to then avoid becoming contaminated. In the case of the Marburg, are there any key points that you'd want to share with us as journalists to then pass on to the public as ways to then avoid becoming infected with this particular virus? Secondly, when such outbreaks happen, as was rightly mentioned, the regional bits and how we could possibly get to other countries is a key thing that's worth paying attention to. If you had to offer any advice to government in the sub-region, whether those neighboring Ghana, across the West African sub-region or across the African sub-region, in terms of how to avoid any possible similar outbreak in their nations, what would that advice be? And then just the quick final one, is there anything else that you think beyond the measures you've outlined that the government of Ghana is undertaking to contain the situation that they should possibly pay attention to, as a way of advice to the government of Ghana specifically? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. So, well, the last question in terms of advice and also with regards to what journalists and the public are supposed to do. I think I did mention a part of this as some of the key blocks or things that we need to do. First of all, is to observe and to know what the virus is about. So the first thing is over reliance on bushmeat and then involving in hunting at this time along the regions where this has occurred. In the Ashanti region and northern region is something that should not be encouraged. And as much as possible, people must put some level of brakes on some of this at this crucial moment. The second point is that, I mean, if you have people who are sick, either in the families who are having fever and then may have advanced stages of bleeding or diarrhea, quickly, they must be sent to the healthcare facility. They must not be managed in the house with herbs or local treatments, and people must avoid having contacts with these individuals because you cannot tell if they have it or not. So such people must be sent to the healthcare facility and quickly be taken care of. Even if you have to take care of these people, you must seek advice in terms of the wearing of the right gloves, the goggles, the boots, and how you must protect yourself to even handle such people who are sick. That is the second thing that we need to educate people about. The third is that now if somebody dies along those regions, Ashanti, northern regions, it is important that the people don't take into their hands to process and handle the burials of these individuals. It's not advisable. Such, they must engage the health authorities to advise them on what to do. When there's a suspicion that these are classical cases of Marburg, then the health authorities are the ones who have to be responsible for burial of such individuals. And I think the last thing that we have to let people understand is the need for them to observe the prevention protocol. As much as possible, avoid close contact with people, put on, have hand sanitizers. Even when you have to shake, you must sanitize your hands and ensure that you don't overly get exposed to this. So, and washing your hand with soap and water are things that are still relevant when it comes to handling this. And maybe the very last one is cooking food. You must cook your meat well to ensure that you don't get yourself involved in this. So the second question is on what advice to government. So government must intensify campaign at the border regions. In Ghana, for instance, the border between Savannah regions and then the northern parts, and then our neighbors in Burkina Faso must be intensified very well. If somebody dies along those border regions, the bodies must not be moved to Burkina Faso for burial because of the potential of movement of this to other places. The case in Ebola is a lesson for us, where we had cases where bodies were moved between Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone borders, which resulted in the movement of outbreaks along this path. So people must be educated that as soon as somebody dies, they call the health authorities to come in and support them with the burial services, not to be involved in handling this by themselves. If people get to that level where they begin to move bodies across the borders, then there is a chance that the border-to-border transmission may occur. But we hope that the education is intensified so that we don't get to that level. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Owusu, for that clarification. Esther has a follow-up question. Yes, Esther, then we give the mic to Imaboy.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Dr. Michael, again. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the fact that okay, I need a clarification, really. If the first case was identified in Guinea, and now we have Marburg in Ghana, is it necessarily that we had, a crossover from Guinea to Ghana, or the cases in Ghana are what you described earlier on, that when people were tested, they found that there was some sort of dormant Marburg disease in the people? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, like I mentioned before, Marburg does not have a potential of being transmitted through air flights, or even through vehicles that move from country to country. So the places that we have recorded in Guinea, in Uganda, for Marburg cases, these are not the cases that were moved to Ghana. It's not imported cases. The cases in Ghana are unlinked to any imported case. The people have not traveled before. They have not come to contact with those who have traveled before. So for all the cases which are recorded in Africa, they have got it possibly from animal origin, because the animals that cause this are all over across different parts of Africa. So the Ghana case, we are yet to know which animal, but it is likely that either rodents or some mammals or bats might have transmitted this to us. Because when you have Marburg and you start getting feverish, you are not likely to travel. You have to stay home and get yourself managed. So, and within a short while, you may likely become severely ill and may likely die. So it is unlikely to have importation in different countries, very, very unlikely. But then the borders where people can walk, like in Ghana, people are living in part of the northern region, but also their families are in Burkina. So they can cross the border to visit their families and then perform some marketing and come back. So where people can walk across the borders, it means that when they have families who die in Ghana, they can carry the body and move to another country and have the burial service. So that is where the transmission can occur. And Guinea is unlinked to Ghana in any way. So you cannot have such movement. You can only move mostly by flight. But for Burkina, for Ivory Coast, you can have such border movement. That is what I can say for now.
Mr. Is that enough, or do you have another clarification with regards to what the doctor has said, so that we follow it up immediately?
Yeah, Doctor, I'm really sorry, Sharon. How much surveillance are you doing, Doctor, in Ghana, in terms of, from animal to people? How much surveillance are you doing? Because I'm asking this because sometimes we do not have enough surveillance in Africa, as you know, and that makes us, not have the proper presentation of what is going on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So, that surveillance is very expensive. The situation in Africa. Now you are looking at human surveillance and then animal surveillance. So in Ghana, we have engaged the Wildlife Health Division to conduct surveillance along the animal chain. But this involves a lot of work, going out there to look for the different animals, catching them, and then testing their samples to find out which of them are reservoirs of this, and ensuring that people are well protected even before they go out to do this kind of research work. That is very intensive, and that is also cost demanding. And so although we are doing this to some level, I also know that funding support is heavily required to support the Wildlife Division to do this. So I may have to get some updates to find out more what is being done and how things are going. But I think it's one of the concerns that we need to strengthen and ask for support from government agencies and funding agencies to ensure that this is done actively. Because when this is not done actively, we'll be only waiting for another time for a spillover to occur. And that is what is happening in Africa. You hear that Guinea may have another outbreak, not because somebody has it, but because a certain animal somewhere has spilled it over again into the human population. This is what is likely to happen in many other African countries, including Ghana. So I understand there is need for this, but like Ghana, like many other African countries, funding support is required get this running. And we hope that our government will look more closely at this and get this moving for us.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for that. Imabol, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
hello.
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor. Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor, for your time. So you mentioned that there is a challenge to distinguish Marburg from other viral hemorrhagic fever. So as you know, vaccines are also critical to the prevention and control of infectious disease outbreaks such as Marburg. So as part of prevention mechanism, I learned that there have been some experimental vaccine against Marburg vaccine that have already demonstrated protective efficacy in small animals. So why the focus on Marburg alone? And what is the international community doing to stop other highly infectious diseases such as monkeypox now today? Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So, I mean, you know that when it comes to infection diseases that are localized or regionalized, it's not easy to come out with active treatment and vaccines for this, because the technology required, the capacity, and the funding support, most of them come from the West. So it is when you have organisms or viruses that have pandemic potential, this is where people want to look more closely at, because of the likely impact of this and the likely support people may get from profits that they make out of this. So in the case of COVID, you have seen the rapidity with which vaccines came in. The case of Ebola, over years now, there is the vaccine that is available. I mean, that is being given, that was used, some parts. In the case of Marburg, like you mentioned, a lot is being done. But as we speak now, even for vaccines that are being done, it has to go through clinical trial, and then to ensure that it's safe and also efficacious before it will come back to use. The push for this will be determined by funding support and the willingness of the pharmaceutical companies to invest in this. Like I mentioned, Marburg and Ebola appear to be regional based. And if you have regional based organisms that are mostly located in Africa, you know, you have to do a lot of campaign and then get support from WHO and many funding bodies to get this running. So when this is not adequately done, you are not likely to get the needed attention like what we have seen for others. So, I mean, journalists, we all need to make this noise so that we'll have the international community attention, so that some of these we could easily work together with it and get it sorted out.
Imabol, has your question been answered, or do you have a follow-up question?
Thank you so much. It's now clear. Thank you so much.
Doctor, personally, I had a question. You talked of testis inflammation, which can lead to transmission of the virus. So I was just wondering, until what period of time can this transmission not occur? Like, these people are supposed to be in probation for how long for them not to spread the Marburg virus, even after being cured themselves?
Well, actually, after being cured, you are unlikely to transmit, except what we know so far is that the virus can survive in semen. So for males, for instance, like the case in Ebola, after being cured, there is a chance that if the person continues to have sexual intercourse, the person may transmit. So you avoid sexual intercourse even after being cured for some time. This is what we also do about this.
That's a very interesting one. So you've talked of also local transmissions, and yet you said that these bats and rodents are found all over Africa. So what makes West Africa more endemic to these diseases than other parts of Africa?
Well, if you ask me, I would say that it's maybe because of the population density of the mammals that we have across the chain. If you have studied some of the reports dated back from the 1980s, where animals were being moved from Africa to Europe in the name of science and research, and that is how come this occurred. I mean, read the literature, you understand that even for monkeypox, the first case of monkeypox in the US were from squirrels that were imported into the US from Ghana. And later on, they found out that those squirrels and other mammals were harboring some of the monkeypox viruses. So because we have huge density of mammals across the chain in Africa, and these are living in their own ecosystem. But then in Africa, we are breaking into these ecosystems by pulling down trees, cutting them, bushmeat, feeding on these animals, trying to remove them from their natural ecosystem and natural home. And as we do this, we engage and come into close contact with them. And that is where we begin to experience some of these things. So our unique, tropical nature, the forest zones, and the density of population of mammals makes us a bit prone to some of these unique viruses, which is why I think we experience this from time to time.
Yes, Steve, I can see your hand is up. You can ask your question. Thanks so much, Doctor.
Yes. Thank you, Doctor, for the presentation. I would like to know what is the incubation period of Marburg, and who are the most likely people to be infected with this virus, like if you take age groups?
Okay, so the incubation period is from 2 to 21 days. If you have it within 2 to 21 days, you can manifest the symptoms and will likely experience it. But then, if you talk about which groups are most susceptible, everyone is susceptible to this, irrespective of the age group. Unlike COVID, where those who have underlying medical conditions are likely to suffer severe illness, Marburg is no respecter of that. Anybody at all who is exposed and handles this can have severe infection and die. That is why we say the case fatality is up to about 80 to 90%. If 100 people get the disease, it's likely that none of them will recover. If they will recover at all, just about 10 to 20 of them will recover. The rest are likely to die. So this is a serious thing that we are dealing with on the continent.
Yes, Mr. Twill, I can see you've unmuted. Do you have a question?
I was wondering, do we have a bit of biomedical history of the Marburg and maybe other hemorrhagic fevers in the traditional society? Were there any stories about them, or they just emerged once the modern science came in, so people realized that? Like Marburg, there are people who may think it had background elsewhere, but that clarification is important to avoid misunderstanding. Like, did they have traditional, stories about these diseases, do and don'ts, just like the other diseases that we were told by grandmothers and other people were within the environment? Just a bit of biomedical history.
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. And I think that maybe those of us in science will have to try and dig into our archives and then to understand how this was dealt with. Because as I mentioned to you, there are reports that even in Ghana, as of the 1997, some people found antibodies to Marburg among HIV patients, 3 of them out of 48 people that were screened. So I have a firm belief that we used to have this occur years back, some years back in different places, but then maybe these were attributed to some gauze or some strange illness that struck people and they died, for which we couldn't investigate because technology was not available. Knowledge was also not available. So maybe it was just defined as a mystery for which people use their own means and ways to cure or to treat. It's a question that I'm not too sure how it used to happen. maybe we may have to do some research further on to try and see how this was dealt with and what is changing now and how we are seeing it today.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for the wonderful presentation and for taking your time to join us today. We hear you have another engagement. So there being no further questions, hopefully we can excuse you. Questions which we will share out your contact so that they can share the questions with you for follow-up. But we will really like to thank you for taking the opportunity to join us today in this briefing, and we look forward for more updates from you in the future. Have a very lovely morning. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. So hopefully, I couldn't give you some slides because I couldn't give, but I'll prepare some slides and then send it to Joseph so that you can have some pictures and some ideas on what we discuss about. Thanks a lot, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, Dr. Owusu. Participants, you heard from the good doctor that he will share slides with us, and as soon as he shares them with us, we will surely share them with you also. Thank you very much for the engagement that we've had during this session. And for those in Ghana, we wish you a lovely morning. For those on this other side of Africa, we wish you a very lovely afternoon. So goodbye from Africa Science Media Center, and we will share the recordings with everyone who registered for this meeting. Thank you so much.
Just a quick one, Sharon. I've just shared the link to where you can access today's recording. Probably after 30 minutes, it will be ready. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you guys for being very patient. We look forward to having you in the next press briefing. You can all...
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.